Okay, good morning, guys. Let's get started. So let me know if you can hear me okay. Who's on, actually? All right, I'll just rip into it as the others join as we get on. Welcome to TradeSetup and the overnight market review. So we're just going to go through what's happening overnight, or what happened, what's could be triggering the markets for today. Obviously, the US was down. The kickoff to the move down was the trade war, trade talks. They've got a high-level meeting on Thursday, Friday, and coming into that high-level meeting overnight, it was a bit more argy-bargy. So it looks like would not at all expect I don't think anyone else does now, expect any sort of resolution soon. I think it's just going to continue on the way it is, talking it up, trying to buoy the market, and then getting nowhere as they keep coming at loggerheads to each other. So I think China's got no intention of making a deal. And the US doesn't look like they have any intention of making a deal. And I think tariffs will kick off from 25 to 30%. I think it's on 250 billion. I can't remember the exact figures, but that's meant to be due on the 15th. So in about a few days' time. So that's just after the meeting. So don't expect, I don't personally expect at all to come to some sort of resolution. I don't even expect them to dress it up and talk it up a bit. Just the way it's been overnight between the US and China, and I would expect some. So the US is actually, for anyone that doesn't know, they come out and put on the blacklist, on the ban list, a few more companies, Chinese companies, along with a few 20 or so. I think what do they call them? Departments or Chinese security areas or concerns, whatever. So they blacklisted quite a bit more. And they're also talking about, was it pension funds not being able to invest into China or cutting that anyway. So there's a lot going on there from the US, and that's, and that's why we were talking yesterday of Trump really starting to pressure the Fed to cut rates because he knows that they're not going to come to some sort of resolution, and he probably knew that they were going to be doing this, or he would have known that they were going to do this. So that's pressuring the markets either way, and I don't think the Fed come out and spoke overnight. They're talking the same sort of talk or the same sort of story that if the numbers warrant it, they will cut rates, but they're not going to be pressured into cutting rates if the data doesn't suggest it. So if the data is not suggesting that the either jobs are weaker than expected, are coming out weaker, or are going to slow a lot, or consumer spending is another big thing. If that's not going to slow, then they're not going to just cut rates for the hell of it, just to to appease Trump, I guess. So the same story's out, and that's really, I think, pressured the markets overnight. Well, that's what did pressure the markets overnight. So you can see the currencies took a bit of a hit as US dollar rallied. I think it rallied around the open of the US session. You can see the Aussie is actually popping up and around, well, they tipped over a bit earlier. It's more on the euro. So the euro was around 10:30, 11 o'clock. They started tipping over. That was rallying. The Aussie was rallying. The pound was really going sideways to down anyway. So they've got their own Brexit issues. That's what sent them lower. That coupled with a rally in the US dollar as a safe haven. Safe haven flows into the US dollar, then it's tipped over the currencies. Now, don't forget, the US dollar is a safe haven out of the euro because they're not cutting rates as much. So if the global growth continues to slow, you got the trade wars continuing to pressure global markets, then you're going to get the euro or the ECB probably continuing to try to support the currency, by rate cuts. So that's what's pressuring the markets at the moment, and what's pressuring the US dollar higher, because they got the offset of rate cuts is the fact that the US dollar is a safe haven for other, because of the currency, the interest rate differential, and because it's just a traditional safe haven. So that's going to be pressure on the upside and potential rate cuts pressure on the downside. So it's going to keep flying around between gains and losses, and you're going to get these chopping around on the currencies. But if the markets start taking a bit of a nosedive in equities, there's going to be flow into safe haven, which is a flow into the US dollar to gold, things like that, which is going to keep pressuring your currencies lower, gold higher. Let's take a look at gold at the moment. And you can see that did what we were talking about. The markets, it's this $1,500 level. It's tested it a few times, pressed through. extended this move, like we mentioned a few times now. That's the move down where it bounced off the 1500, and that from the highs, it pretty much to a T went straight down, extended that move, that volatility projection we call it. Let's just make that there, and then started to bounce. So we were looking, because it's broken through that level, it's cleaned out quite a few of these shorts, bounced, and you've got the pressure come back down and retest. So now we could be looking at this scenario. Maybe a pullback here, and we want to see if it can hold a higher low. So you've still got potentially negativity of people just getting a bit concerned if they're long gold, that they're going to get squeezed out on a move down, holding lower highs, and the bulls that are holding, holding lower highs for the sellers and holding higher lows for the buyers. And it's going to be really that bet who's going to win out. And I think for me, I'm anticipating the bulls are going to start to pick up, especially if global markets start to deteriorate more, and equity markets anyway, and risk comes out of shares. They're going to go somewhere, probably into gold, more than likely into gold, especially as things really start to get a bit of a drive higher. Markets just start to drive lower, and the concern starts to drive higher. So I would expect this sort of action, a bit of chop, and then the bulls start to outweigh the bears and markets to move higher on gold anyway. So that's pretty much it. You'll see, DAX was that pretty much from the open tipped over. The same with the Dow, open lower, started to perk up, started to get some buying into the Dow, and I think it was right up until, I think it was more to do with the Powell come out and spoke late in the session, probably around the 4 o'clock mark, I think it was, 4:30 mark, and started. He didn't signal, okay, just because the US is doing this and Trump's having his trade war doesn't mean we're gonna cut rates. So the market's sort of taken that in stride, tipped over, and there's also something else that triggered them lower. I think it was Visa. So the US or Parliament, or whatever you call it, the White House, has come out and said there's going to be further restrictions on Chinese visas for maybe diplomats or whatever it may be. But there's going to be a bit more pressure, or they're going to be a bit more stringent on visas, which is just fuel to the fire. And that's why the market's tipped over into the close, a last-minute sell-off. Things just are not looking that good at the moment. But we'll see. It could turn around on a dime. Trump comes out and says something, but sooner or later, it's one of those stories. The less action and continued talk is going to lead to people just rallies getting shortened and falls be exacerbated. So any sort of move to the downside is going to get exacerbated, because now there's obviously looking at earnings coming out and not going to hit their marks. It's going to probably be a lot lower. And if the idea that the trade war is just going to continue to pressure, their outlook's not going to be that great either. So that's going to pressure, your US, the S&P, the Dow, and things, and the Nasdaq. You would expect anyway. So that's that's going to flow onto our market without a doubt. The US being the leader. So let's just take a look at the opens down 13. We're expecting about 60 points down. So we'll just see what the SPY's done and just see how that might play out. So the SPY, it hasn't really moved. So that's the move. We closed somewhere up here, around the 59 mark. I think it was. No, it's a 4 o'clock close. Yeah, 59. Tipped up, retested the highs, and then fell over during the European session. And I think it was, prior to the US open, it did open lower, and then we chopped around, and that was that last-minute sell-off. We took a bit of a nosedive along with the US into the close. So that to me is you've got a lower highs just come in, playing out on the SPY, which would mean lower prices. So if you can sort of look at it this way, we could be heading down towards, which takes us pretty much in line with this low here, 64, 64. So that would suggest another 30 points or so, 40 points on the downside. Whether it's today, the next few days, but that's what it's looking at the moment. We might be tip over again in the European session, start to push down to those lows. So at the moment, that's what we're looking at. We're not going to be on the buy side. You wouldn't want to really be on the buy side at the moment. I think as there's trade concerns or expectations that they're not going to do anything. And even China said that they're expecting a shortened meeting because there's no positivity around. So they're sort of putting their hand up saying, don't expect too much. Trump is trying to pressure the Fed to cut rates, knowing that, I would assume, knowing that there's no deal on the cards, knowing that he's going to pressure it further. And that's his tactics, maximum pressure, coming to meetings, and then hoping for some sort of outcome. But I don't think the Chinese are really worried about that. I think they're a lot better at negotiating, and it's started to show out anyway. So that's where we're at. Yeah, expect 60 down, or maybe that move today to be a bit exacerbated, which would take us to another 30 to go down to 65.30 somewhere. We'll look at the intraday charts. I should look at the 6 months. So somewhere, towards these lows at 65. So there could be another, if we're down 60 on the open, which is another 5 to 10 minutes, I'll say 10 past 10, 11 past 10, would take us somewhere around 65.30, 20 to 30. I would suggest we're going to be testing 65 or testing this low today. I think that move is going to be a bit more exaggerated than what we think. We're going to be tested down because don't forget what you've got on the overall market, on the ASX. It's probably not going to. Let's just show that a bit better. So from that move up, I'll just draw it up. There's a few key factors, bearish key factors. That's the move up. You've got this move down. Okay, we broke through this level, these anchor levels. It's come back down. It's popped back up, and that's to me is a confirmed. Once you start getting this type of thing, if I can draw it up a bit better, you've got this move down, a little minor lower high, and we've got that capitulation. That's a key lower high. We're coming back down. Eventually, I think we're going to be testing 64, which maybe the next few days, just depending on what happens in the US. You've got the market's gone from overbought to oversold, but there's no reason it can't hover around oversold and keep pushing lower. I think with that lower high starting to come in place, it leads you to a potential retest of 64, even a break of 64 down the track. You can see momentum is really heading south to the sell side. So there's not much positivity around at the moment. Anyway, we'll see how we go on the open. We're down 39 at the moment. We could be a bit surprised, but you got a few minutes until it's fully open. There's still a lot of room to move on the downside. We'll just see what the SPY's doing to finish up. Yeah, it's not bouncing at all. So I think that's starting to, that might tip over. There might be some buying. You might get, and you got anyone that's short from here onto that close or short off this lower high around 65.40 is in profit. They're well and truly up. They might get squeezed out with a bit of a bounce, but yeah, there's no real pressure just at the moment. Anyway, let's just call it a day there. We'll hopefully be back in tomorrow. We'll get a few more people on. But anyway, have a good day, good luck, and we'll speak to you soon. Cheers, bye.